I knew it was finished the moment he called the server room quaint. He hadn't even set his vegan lunchbox down yet, just strolled in like he was filming for some glossy pharma commercial, grinning with blinding teeth and smugness in equal measure. His first words? Something about reimagining operational agility. I watched him slowly sweep the room with that self-satisfied gaze. The control center filled with years of patched wires, taped up failover notes, power backups, hand-scribbled guides carefully pinned beside the routers. Wow, he said, smirking. This place is a museum. We used to call it the Heart Room. Not an official name, but it fit. When the old director, Greg, retired, a man who once soldered a patch panel by hand during a blizzard because FedEx couldn't deliver, it felt like the place exhaled. Not with relief, but with resignation, as if it knew no successor would ever truly grasp it again. I've been here 8 years. No flash, just clean handwriting and precise process. I've steered the system through 3 mergers and 2 hostile takeover attempts. I've stopped chain outages with duct tape and a borrowed VPN. I've trained people who now run whole departments in Dallas and Omaha. I built this operation to bend, but never break. So when director Vincent Gray swept in like he was late to his own coronation, I kept quiet. He was exactly what I expected. Tossed out buzzwords like synergize and sunset the legacy stack before even glancing at the load logs. He sneered at the topology map I'd hand-drawn while setting up the Chicago failover. Then he laughed, actually laughed, when I handed him my clipboard. This, he said, holding it like it was a dirty rag. You still use paper? This is outdated. And with that, he tossed it straight into the trash can beside my desk. He never even looked at what was inside. That clipboard carried 8 years of operational knowledge, not theory, not vendor fluff, but real fixes. Notes in the margins: how to cold reboot Palmetto without tripping timeout errors in Kansas City, which data center had that temperamental breaker, which router glitched during daylight savings unless you cycled it manually first. And buried at the very back, written in red Sharpie, was the discovery no one else had caught. When the load index exceeds 9.2, failover routes to null. Do not override the manual override. I watched him throw it away. Said nothing. That was day 1. Next came his crew of consultants, all grins and thick glasses, preaching cloud migration and redundancy optimization. They asked me where to find firewall logs, took photos of our systems like tourists, held 3 separate meetings just to choose dashboard colors. Meanwhile, I started coming in earlier than usual, just to stand in the quiet before the chaos, listening to the hum of the fans, watching the drive lights blink their Morse code. Sometimes I'd take the clipboard back out of the trash and flip through the pages like scripture. Then, carefully, I'd put it back where he left it. Maybe I should have spoken up. Maybe I should have fought harder. But I've seen people like him before. If you warn them, they dismiss you as bitter, territorial, stuck in the past. They don't see that the past is the only reason the present still works. By the end of week 2, he held a team meeting, what was left of us, anyway. Stood tall and declared, we're starting fresh. This operation is a rust bucket. I'm here to modernize it. I didn't look up. Just wrote 1 word in my notebook, observed. When he noticed, he pointed and asked, is that the new system documentation? No, I said evenly. It's my lunch order. He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, look, I'll be blunt, already planning to be, you need to digitize your knowledge. These scribbles won't cut it anymore. We need scalable solutions, not. He let the sentence hang like a bad smell. My stomach turned, but I smiled cold. I'll get right on that, I told him. But not the way he wanted. That night, I photocopied every single page from the clipboard and locked the copies in my bottom drawer at home. The original stayed exactly where he tossed it, buried in the trash. When Greg retired, he left me a note. Just 3 words, keep it breathing. I'm not naive. I knew what was coming. I saw it in Vincent's glazed eyes during architecture briefings, in the way he cringed when we mentioned routing dependencies between warehouse clusters. He wasn't here to learn. He was here to replace, so he could slap his name on something shiny. He didn't want maintenance, responsibility, or resilience. He wanted plug and play. And sure, he was going to get his dashboard. Shiny, pricey, fragile, By the end of his first month, he pinned a laminated roadmap on the break room board. 4 colors, 12 phases, not a single clue. He called it Operation Streamline, like this was some feel-good rebrand, not open-heart surgery on the logistical core of a national network. Phase 1. Eliminate legacy middleware dependencies. Translation. Rip out the glue without asking what it's holding together. He rolled in a SaaS suite with a 5-syllable name and a login that crashed 3 times during the demo. Phase 2. Replace manual overrides with auto-resolve logic trees. I asked once, what happens when the tree loops into itself? He blinked as if I'd spoken an ancient script. Well, then the system will learn not to do that again. That was the first red flag. Quiet. Polite. The weekly roundtable. I wasn't officially invited in. Just a note, I said, tapping a line on the ops plan they were projecting. We've seen recursive loops in that failover chain before. If the auto-resolve doesn't fail cleanly, it'll collapse in on itself. He grinned like some overenthusiastic camp counselor. Thanks for the input, but if we want to grow, we have to stop clinging to old ghosts. I didn't push back. Just scribbled a note. Loop will eat itself. Director smiles. A week later, they rolled out the new warehouse sync API. Never mind that it didn't adjust for time zone differences or account for real-time GPS data from our own fleet. According to it, Oregon and Ohio existed under the same sunlight. The result? Duplicate orders, phantom deliveries, inventory counts so skewed it looked like Cincinnati was hoarding 1,000 pallets of frozen chicken. I didn't raise a flag, just sent a quiet Slack message to the on-call engineer. We've seen this sync issue before, during daylight saving. It'll miscount shipments and trigger false cold chain failures. He read it, hearted it, then forwarded it to Vincent. Vincent himself replied in the thread. Appreciate the caution, but those are legacy worries. Let's not get sidetracked by noise. Eyes on the vision. Noise. 10 years of edge case handling and fail-safes dismissed as noise by a man who thought DevOps was a gym class. Later that afternoon, I passed the bin near the back stairwell. My clipboard was still there, face down, stained with a faint ring of old coffee. By then it had become a symbol, his little trophy of conquest, a monument to the old guard he believed he'd buried. What he didn't realize was that I'd already rebuilt a private version of the routing schema, color-coded, spread across 11 by 17 sheets, tucked neatly in a binder at home. At the bottom of each one, in red ink, 9.2 is death. Do not override the override. It wasn't a dramatic warning. It was math. Cold, unforgiving math. Every time the load index crept above 9.2, and we forced an auto reroute without manual approval, orders slipped into a null state. Not misplaced, just erased. Gone. Like a magician's scarf pulled into nothingness. Greg and I had tested it years back, during that blizzard that shut down 3 zones. That bug never made it into the Jira archive. It survived only in the margins, in the clipboard, and now in the trash beneath a crushed LaCroix can and a wilted salad. Meanwhile, Vincent strutted through the office like Caesar crossing the Rubicon. He'd stop by desks, rattle off empty lines about disruption with dignity, then inform people their roles were being repurposed for the future. Translation: legacy staff were being cut. Cindy, who handled zone balancing during flu season, gone. Tomas, who built the bridge between our dispatch app and the regional truck's NAV systems, shuffled to analytics. Greg's old assistant, who knew which printers needed manual firmware resets, retired early after her role was redefined out of existence. I stayed, not to save the system, but to finish the record. I tracked every change, every override, every skipped QA, every time Vincent smiled at a problem instead of fixing it. I printed the diffs from staging to production, marked them in red, and filed them away. One night, alone in the control room, I pulled the clipboard from the trash. It still smelled faintly of toner and citrus cleaner, still carried Greg's thumb smudge on page 5. I turned to the final sheet, underlined the red text with a ruler, and placed it back where I found it. Not out of surrender, but ritual. They stripped my team away one by one, like peeling decals off an old company truck. No eye contact. No goodbyes. Vincent called it resource alignment in Monday stand-ups as casually as if he were assembling an IKEA shelf instead of gutting a live operation. By Thursday, Henya from DevOps had been reassigned to cross-functional integration. Translation, stuck in a windowless room, tasked with turning Vincent's buzzword bingo into actual work for outside consultants. She texted me after her re-onboarding. He asked me what DNS is. I told him it wasn't a podcast. Next was Alex. 6 years of backhand patchwork genius, replaced by a 22-year-old contractor from a staffing agency that also offered dog walking. Alex didn't protest. He just cleared his desk, left his badge face up on his chair. Like a funeral. They kept me, though, for now. Vincent said I was too embedded to move mid-project. His exact words, "We need your tribal knowledge. Can't afford a gap there." That's when I knew. When a man like Vincent says tribal knowledge, he's not complimenting you. He's already timing your exit. The very next day, HR emailed me with the subject, KT Prep. Knowledge transfer, the corporate death sentence. They wanted my core workflows, exception handling, redundancy logic, all documented and centralized in Confluence. So I gave them exactly what they asked for. 1,000 lines of polished flowcharts, full wiki sections on load balancing heuristics, annotated JSON with fallback logic written in 6th grade English. But the real warnings, the ones that mattered, never went online. Those went into a different notebook. Black hardcover. No logos. Ink, not digital. Each section mirrored the official documentation, but this version carried red annotations, margin notes, sarcastic jabs, insights only someone who'd survived our worst outages would understand. Like, at peak load, the new queuing algorithm panics at 7.8 and starts mislabeling dispatch zones. Congrats, you just sent seafood to Arizona. Or, if manual overrides are removed from Southridge warehouse, the auto temp sensors default to Celsius, freezing HVAC at 16 degrees. Good luck trying to haul yogurt when the pallet's iced over with frozen spikes. And there it was again, on the very last page, printed neatly in deliberate red ink. When the load index passes 9.2, failover routes to null. Do not override manual override. I already knew every single risk scenario by heart. These notes weren't for me. I wrote them to leave a trail, not as a shield, but as an echo, proof that someone had spoken long after they claimed nobody warned them. I began showing up half an hour early each morning, not to work, but just to observe. I'd stand outside the operations bullpen with a gas station coffee in hand, eavesdropping. Why is Ohio duplicating order packets? Are we still flagging temps on reroutes? Wait, did anyone disconnect the old sync bridge yet? They had no answers. None of them ever did. At lunch, I disappeared. No invites, no excuses, just long, quiet walks across the mezzanine or down to the abandoned IT locker room, where the lights flickered like a bad horror set and the signal couldn't reach. That's when I started carrying the black notebook everywhere. Never left it unattended. Never more than an arm's reach away. If I was going down, it wouldn't be defenseless. It would be on my terms, my truth in my own hands. Then the contractors rolled in. Smiling faces, company lanyards, branded fleece zipped up like uniforms. Most didn't even understand what our work was. One of them, a kid named Declan, leaned over my cube and asked if order flow meant how people filled their online carts. I didn't bother answering, just pointed at the pipeline flow map scrawled across the whiteboard. He stared at it like I'd just drawn the Large Hadron Collider. That afternoon, Vincent called me in. He told me how glad he was that I supported the transition. I looked him in the eye and said, I'm exactly where I need to be. He grinned like he'd won something, like I had just toasted his promotion instead of silently preparing his autopsy report. That night, I pulled the clipboard out of the trash again. The red warning page was still spotless, perfectly legible. I pressed it flat to my desk and traced the letters until I was sure they were burned into memory. Then I slid it back into the bin, where it belonged, or where someone would eventually discover it. They called it a soft launch, corporate code for we're not ready, but we're doing it anyway. The plan, if you could call it that, was to run Vincent's polished new pipeline alongside the legacy system. Same inputs, split outputs, compare the results in real time. On paper, that meant nothing would fail. In practice, it meant things started failing in two places at once. At first, the errors were small. A handful of Missouri zip codes misread as commercial zones, triggering wrong surcharges. Then some medical shipments slipped from cold chain into standard, arriving spoiled and useless. The system didn't break outright, it just drifted, like a car sliding off the shoulder while the driver fiddled with the radio. The old system still caught the mismatches, patched together with a decade of handwritten logic, hidden back doors, and precarious flags stacked like Jenga bricks. But when I raised the discrepancies in Tuesday's sync, Vincent didn't even look up from his iPad. "That's just legacy tech debt," he said, waving me off like a fly. We knew there'd be noise. Once we cut over, it'll clean up. I almost laughed. Tech debt? No, the only debt belonged to him, and interest was piling up every hour. Don't call it debt when the very thing keeping your lights on is the system you're racing to pull the plug on. But I didn't argue. I'd already stopped talking. He wasn't listening, and I was finished translating hard-earned experience into bullet points for someone who thought consultants and coffee subscriptions could replace engineers. I walked out of that meeting, unplugged my work laptop, and shut off all system alerts tied to my email. From my locker, I grabbed my old ThinkPad, the one with the cracked corner and faint coffee-scorched smell, and rerouted my personal alerts there. No company VPN, no shared drives, no new installs. Just a terminal window, a live dashboard, and a few scripts Greg and I had written back when engineers still mattered more than invoices. By Thursday, the load index climbed to 6.3. By Friday afternoon, it reached 7.1. It began creeping in quietly, like the first faint drip from a cracked pipe, unnoticed until the crawl space is already flooding. The load index was the warning signal, showing how close the system edged toward collapse. Not just volume, it measured chaos. Rerouted paths, failovers stacking, latency piling up, cold chain slip-ups, database stalls. Once it climbed past 9.2 without a human hand stepping in, the whole structure would tilt sideways. Orders wouldn't simply slow, they'd vanish. Routes funneled into nothing, swallowed by a digital trash compactor. I warned him twice, once face-to-face, once written in Sharpie. And now the numbers inched dangerously close to the brink. Vincent didn't care. He was too wrapped up in seeing his name plastered across the company newsletter as the transformation lead. His roadmap had reached phase 5, shutting down the legacy system, which meant he was dismantling the safety net while the trapeze artist was still midair. The Slack channels looked like battlegrounds, filled with emojis and exclamation marks. The East Coast warehouse duplicated a night route again. Someone asked if we were missing the Tuesday bulk push for grocery clients. Another flagged triple-off errors in the QA environment. And the answers were always identical, looking into it. Probably caching. Legacy API is skewing the results. But the old system wasn't skewing anything. It was fixing things, catching their missteps, and rerouting them silently, like a parent tidying up after a toddler gone wild with a paintbrush. But it couldn't keep doing that forever. Not once the cutover went final. And Vincent made that official Monday morning. A department-wide email at 6:48 a.m. declared, "This Friday, the legacy system sunsets. All operations will move to the new architecture. No risk, no reward, no risk." My jaw locked so hard I thought my molars shifted. That same morning, I arrived an hour ahead of everyone else. Sat in the back of the control room with my own laptop, connected to the legacy dashboard, and just watched. Load index 8.0. I texted the number to myself, just so it lived somewhere outside their ecosystem. That afternoon, Vincent held another meeting, gushing about the value unlock this cutover would bring. Promised we were about to enter full autonomy. Half the team looked at him like he was launching a rocket to Mars. The other half stared like they were already burning and just avoiding eye contact with the flames. I kept my face blank, nodded when expected, spoke not a word. But in my notebook, I wrote one line. Friday, 2 p.m., overload index 8.0. They think it's normal. It wasn't normal. It was the sound of a system holding its breath. And I was the only one listening. The one-on-one came through as a casual coffee chat, No subject line, just a calendar block labeled sync. Thursday at 4:15. End of day. End of patience. I knew exactly what it meant. He was already in conference room B when I walked in. Blinds closed for theatrical effect. Laptop open but untouched, meant to remind me how little I mattered to the spreadsheet he wasn't even reading. He looked up, that managerial smile tight and vitamin bright. "Thanks for making the time," he said, motioning to the chair across like he was inviting me to my own funeral. I sat, arms crossed, silent. "So," he started, fingers laced like he was about to propose. I wanted to check in. Notice some distance, maybe a lack of enthusiasm. His head tilted just so, the therapist tilt. He'd rehearsed this. "You've been here a long time. I respect that. But we're moving in a new direction. We need alignment. Are you still committed to the vision?" There it was, the breadcrumb trail to the drop. I gave him a flat smile. No warmth, no teeth, just polite enough while chiseling the gravestone. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He blinked once, not the reply he expected. He'd been waiting for an apology, maybe tears, some crack of fear or gratitude. Instead, I sat there like stone. "Well," he said finally, leaning back, "I appreciate the honesty. I'll note that." Of course he would. I walked out without shaking his hand. By Friday morning, my name had already vanished from the ops update. I was missing from incident review threads. My Slack access evaporated overnight. First, I was cut from hashtag logistics score, then hashtag InfoWatch, eventually even hashtag team lunch. The last insult, they handed my Jira permissions to Declan, the human haircut. I didn't argue, didn't ask, didn't even flinch, because I'd already won. The real work, the only work that mattered, wasn't done with approval. It was done quietly, carefully, without their knowledge. I had rerouted the critical alerts to a server they could never touch, an old home machine in my basement. I'd named it Cerberus, 3 fail-safes, silent as stone, only barking when TrueFire broke out. Cerberus now ran headless, cloaked by VPN, untraceable. It carried the original failover schema, the live load index tracker, and every threshold warning piped straight to a burner number only I could see. I'd scheduled cron jobs to ping me at 8.5, 8.8, 9.0, and most importantly, 9.2. Because at 9.2, the system wouldn't just fail. It would disappear. Not with a crash, but with a soft digital exhale. Orders dissolving into nothing. Invoices routed to oblivion. Warehouses waiting for trucks that would never come. A ghost operation haunting its own database. They'd blame tech debt. They'd blame QA. They'd try to pin it on me, but I was already erased. And everything they needed? I left it in the trash. All week I drifted through the halls like a relic no one wanted to acknowledge still worked. Side glances followed me. Some pitied me. Some thought I'd finally burned out. Nobody realized I still carried the design. Not online, not stored in their beloved wiki, but etched in my mind, inked on paper. That couldn't be erased. Friday afternoon, while the buzz grew for the big cutover deployment, Vincent sent a cheerful team-wide announcement about the next era of operational excellence. I skimmed it once, then archived it. At 1:17 p.m., Cerberus pinged me. Load index 8.6, right on schedule. I shut my laptop, slid the black notebook into my bag, grabbed my coat, and walked straight out the front doors as if it were just another day. But it wasn't. That was the last moment anyone inside that building could honestly say they knew what they were doing. Friday, 11:47 a.m. I had closed my terminal, locked the screen, and left without a word. No goodbyes. No heading to lunch. No passive-aggressive Slack status with a coffee emoji. Just silence. The kind that lingers louder than any farewell speech could. My badge still scanned. My ID still opened doors. But the real system, the one that mattered, was no longer there. It had already logged out, carried away in my head. The late summer sun baked the parking lot as I walked past rows of leased SUVs and hybrid sedans, each belonging to someone who still clung to Vincent's so-called roadmap, or at least pretended they did. I cut across the mulch bed behind the northeast wing, past the forgotten bike rack, into the alley by Jefferson Street. 3 blocks later, I sat down at a sidewalk cafe with a clear view of the glass tower they called headquarters. The same view Greg and I once shared whenever we needed to speak off record, back when words still solved problems. I ordered a black coffee and a quesa. No fanfare, no emotion, just the kind of calm that hangs before a thunderstorm. At 12:06, I checked the dashboard on my phone. Servers had already pinged. Load index 8.7. They'd sped up routing again, probably under Vincent's orders, likely to mask latency issues before the 2 p.m. switchover. I could picture him pacing the ops floor, bouncing between teams, tossing out phrases like final validation and post-legacy stabilization. And I could picture the engineers nodding along, smiling politely, because their jobs depended on not asking the wrong questions. At 12:48, the Midwest lit up with a spike. A false cold chain reroute to the wrong carrier tier. Their system tried to patch it, sort of, but in the process generated 2 duplicate tickets, one pointing to an offline loading dock in Akron. Cerberus caught it quietly. New anomaly signature. Index 8.9. I took a sip of coffee. The sky was beginning to darken. Back inside HQ, the CEO was buried in the budget room, fighting with Q4 numbers. I knew because the calendar had flagged it all week as Q4 containment strategy. That meant he'd be unavailable, unreachable, and most importantly, oblivious. Vincent had timed it well. For him, this was the touchdown dance. He thought the system would limp along just long enough to prove the transition seamless. He was probably already dreaming about a promotion, maybe even branding himself as the pioneer of some shiny new innovation in logistics. He had no clue the ground beneath him was nothing but paper. No idea Cerberus was listening. At 1:23, the West Coast flagged sync delays. Barely milliseconds, but enough to pile up. By 1:41, one of the new contractors, poor Declan, posted in #OopsLatency asking if anyone else noticed strange lag on the QA shadows. No response. The veterans were gone, and the rookies were too afraid to admit they didn't know what normal was supposed to look like. 1:49 p.m. I refreshed the dashboard. Load index 9.0. Cerberus chimed. A soft ping. Nothing urgent. Just a reminder. A tap on the shoulder. I closed my eyes, breathing in slow. The kind of breath you take when the work is finished and gravity is all that remains. 1:56 p.m. The cafe filled with the sharp scent of espresso and the faint ozone of an approaching storm. I watched the dashboard flag flip. Legacy assist. Active became legacy system. Retired. No ceremony. No backup. Just one careless mouse click on the wrong window. 1:58 p.m. load index 9.1. I finished the last bite of my quesa. Flaky, overbaked, as hollow as Vincent's strategy memo from that morning. Then the wind picked up, carrying a lone brown leaf across the pavement. Cerberus buzzed again. Load index 9.2. Failover threshold breached. Routing anomalies spreading inside that glass fortress. Alarms would be starting to chirp, not shrieking, just puzzled. Like a smoke detector catching hints of something it can't quite identify yet. And somewhere in the ops war room, as dashboards lagged and unread wikis stacked up, someone's eyes might drift to the trash bin in the corner. Still there, crumpled, stained at the edge. My clipboard, the last page half visible. Red ink underlined. When the load index exceeds 9.2, failover will misroute to null. Do not override manual override. They never read it. But now they were about to feel it. 2:14 p.m. The dashboard flickered, just a single stutter, like a skipped heartbeat, before the numbers bled red. OD index spiked to 9.3. Error rate shot up 138%. Average response time dragged into the void. Infinity Cabarrus logged it with the calm precision of a surgeon pronouncing time of death. Inside headquarters, the monitors pulsed in sluggish, sickly waves. Terminals flooded with timeout errors. Order queues swelled from hundreds to thousands in under a minute. The East Coast pipeline, the lifeline for 3 major grocers and a hospital network, cut out as if someone had pulled the plug from the wall. Dispatchers froze, mouths open. Orders weren't just delayed. They were vanishing. No trace, no timestamp. Just the word null flashing across 5 states: New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, gone. The routing logic, redesigned by a consulting team that believed redundancy meant tossing backups into Google Drive, was collapsing in on itself. Without manual overrides, the system kept looping through broken logic trees, chasing paths that no longer existed. It was like watching a GPS direct ambulances straight into a lake. From the war room, someone shouted, "Are we under attack?" "No," another voice trembled, eyes wide. "We did this." In the center, Vincent clutched a dry erase marker like it was a weapon. "Check the staging nodes. Reboot the dynamicular." Probably just a cache issue. But the truth was clear. The dynamicular was reaching for endpoints that had been dead since last night's final queue. The last engineer who still remembered the legacy system opened the docs, searching desperately for rollback instructions. Nothing. The entire wiki had been wiped that morning. The ticket simply read, "Sunset completed." His name wasn't anywhere on it. At the cafe, I drained my espresso as the storm finally broke. Sheets of rain slammed the pavement, wind scattering napkins and flinging a patio umbrella into traffic. I refreshed the dashboard again. Warehouse confirmations, timeout. Dispatch, offline. Inventory sync, error. Live route map, empty. All 5 states showed nothing. No red, no flashing alerts. Just absence. I pictured the Midwest warehouse manager shouting into a headset for trucks that had never left. Dispatchers tapping refresh on tablets that displayed blank queues. Grocers waiting on milk pallets that were still sitting in the dock. The chilled goods, blood packs, chemo shipments, all lost in limbo, abandoned by a system that no longer remembered what real meant. Vincent was probably demanding logs by now. He'd find them. Every one of them would say the same thing. Route null. Because null isn't an error. It's memory erased. And it had been written into the system the moment they deleted the override code. The same line I had marked in red ink on a page they never bothered to read. I paid my bill in cash, left a heavy tip, and stood under the awning as the clouds deepened. Across the street, HQ windows strobed with blinking lights. Shadows moved in panic behind glass. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. The work was complete. 2:17 p.m. Ops War Room had become a sealed pressure cooker, buzzwords mixing with the stench of fear. Every screen screamed red. Error logs poured in like floodwater. Dispatch timers flatlined at 0. The Midwest pipeline was installed. It had vanished. The shiny new system, stitched together from consultant optimism and brittle dependencies, was burning itself alive. No one could explain why. Declan, pale as paper, stammered something about queue loops. Someone else kept unplugging and replugging a monitor, as if that could revive dead logic. A senior engineer whispered on repeat, "It shouldn't be doing this. It shouldn't be doing this." Then the CEO walked in. Gray suit, black coffee, Bluetooth still in his ear. They'd pulled him from a budget meeting with a single panicked alert. Ops collapse. Live cutover failing. Midwest and East Coast down. He didn't ask for a recap. Just one question. What the hell is happening? Silence. Vincent finally spoke, mumbling something about unexpected recursive behavior. But it didn't land. It sounded like what it was, jargon he barely understood. His marker scraped across the whiteboard like he could sketch an escape from the void. But there was no logic left to trace. The systems had stopped routing. The backups refused to trigger. The fallback code was stripped bare. The CEO's gaze swept the room, truly looked, and saw nothing but panic, disorder, and a shattered chain of comprehension. Without speaking, he walked across to the trash bin. Buried beneath a tossed event badge and the crumpled shell of a protein bar wrapper lay the clipboard, tilted awkwardly, half hidden. A little wrinkled, faintly stained, but unmistakable. He pulled it out, brushed it against his sleeve, flipped to the final page, and froze. His eyes locked on a single sentence written in heavy, deliberate red strokes. When the load index passes 9.2, failover redirects to null. Do not override manual override. One line. No buzzwords. No analytics. Just plain unvarnished truth. The room went silent. Not because he said anything, he didn't, but because everyone saw him reading. And in that hush, something shifted. He never asked who wrote it. He didn't need to. He didn't call a meeting, summon legal, or lash out at Vincent, the engineers, or the interns trying to vanish into the walls. He simply walked back, placed the clipboard at the center of the table, face up, and turned his head slowly toward Vincent, then away, as though the origin of failure was already clear. Nobody moved. The red ink glared like a flare across the sterile conference table. She wasn't in that room. She didn't have to be. The system itself carried her voice. The clipboard that had been tossed aside as obsolete was now the lone remnant still speaking truth. And the silence that followed belonged to her as well. Monday morning carried an unfamiliar stillness. No echo of loafers down the hall. No cheerful huddle in the atrium. No background hum of Vincent's voice reciting cliches through frosted glass. Just absence. He was gone. No memo. No farewell email. No Slack update. No polished New Beginnings post on LinkedIn with a beach snapshot and some shallow words about growth. He'd been surgically excised from the org chart. His office stripped clean before dawn. Nameplate vanished. Only the fading trace of cologne remained. Inside the ops war room, the quiet felt different too. Screens still flickered, but dashboards had dropped back into legacy mode. Over the weekend, the system had been rolled back quietly, neatly, by the handful of engineers who still remembered how. The so-called sunset stack rose again, a phoenix pulled from beneath a heap of premature decommissioned slips. She didn't watch it unfold. She didn't need to. At 9:17 a.m., her Slack came alive again. After a week of silence, her access was restored. Channels she'd been removed from pulsed with unread chatter. Her name reappeared in the ops tree. Full admin rights returned. Even the private exec escalation channel sat waiting in her sidebar. She left it untouched. Let the messages rot. At 9:32, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Internal extension. Voicemail transcription blinked on. Hi, this is Carol from the CEO's office. He'd like a quick word whenever you're free. No rush, just give us a call when you can. Thanks. She read it twice, then erased it. At 9:41, she opened LinkedIn. A flood of requests waited, recruiters, ex-colleagues, long-lost contacts, all suddenly praising her insight and begging to reconnect. Funny how vision sharpened only after one failure you hadn't prevented, merely foreseen. She clicked into the headline editor, erased her old title, and typed. Systems Whisperer now consulting. No hashtags, no humble brag, just truth. Closing the laptop, she set it gently on the kitchen table and carried her cooling coffee to the window. Outside, the city thrummed as always, untouched by the internal implosion of a logistics empire that had nearly collapsed under its own arrogance. Nearly. Back inside the CEO's office, a new ornament hung behind the door, the clipboard. Cleaned, flattened, framed in dark walnut, sealed behind glass. The red ink still bled through at the bottom, sharp and unshaken. When the load index passes 9.2, failover redirects to null. Do not override manual override. A quiet memorial. A silent confession. No plaque. No name. Just the line. And that was enough. Thanks for sticking through the chaos. Office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flipping drama. Let's make the exco workers sweat.